Okay, so I want you to picture yourself for a second.
I'm picturing it.
You are sitting in this perfect, uh, really picturesque lotus position right in the middle of your living room.
Very serene.
Exactly. Your eyes are gently closed. Your posture is, just impeccable. You are deep in meditation.
Maybe you would even have some of those high-fidelity, soothing ocean sounds playing.
Oh, yeah, playing in the background from a little smart speaker or something. It looks incredibly peaceful.
It sounds like it.
It looks like the cover of a wellness magazine, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Except for one minor, terrifying detail.
Which is?
Your house is literally burning down around you.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that is an intensely vivid image.
The flames are, licking the drywall. The smoke is billowing across the ceiling. The heat is blistering. And there you are, just sitting on your expensive yoga mat trying to breathe through it.
It's a pretty harrowing visual,
Yeah.
but as we look at the stack of research in front of us today, it's actually incredibly accurate.
It really is.
It perfectly describes how so many of us are operating in the modern world. We are trying to out-meditate a 5-alarm fire.
We really are. And I want to ask you, the listener, right now, have you ever tried to cure a crushing, totally unsustainable week by slapping on a 10-minute meditation app on your phone while, I don't know, hiding in your car?
Or maybe you drew a nice hot bubble bath on a Sunday night.
Yes. Lit a lavender candle, hoping it would wash away the sheer dread of your upcoming Monday schedule.
But what actually happens?
The exact second that bathwater starts draining, you hear that slurping sound, your skin hits the cold air, and the dread just slams right back into your chest.
You feel instantly, suffocatingly stressed all over again.
We have all been there. You're trying to fix a structural collapse with a scented candle and some deep breathing.
Which brings us perfectly to the core concept of today's deep dive. In the collection of expert briefings and clinical literature we're analyzing today, this exact phenomenon has a name.
Right, the burnout paradox.
Exactly, the burnout paradox of the modern professional. The paradox is this: society tells us that to solve the crushing weight of an unsustainable life, we actually need to layer on even more activities.
We are told to add the 6 a.m. hot yoga sessions.
The expensive spa weekends, the rigorous 20-step morning mindfulness routines.
But you return from those brief escapes, those temporary pit stops, really to the exact same structural overload that triggered your collapse in the first place.
You were just adding more tasks to a schedule that is already breaking you.
And that is exactly what we are tackling today. We have a massive, fascinating stack of sources in front of us.
We do. We're talking about a comprehensive collection of expert medical briefings, synthesized neurobiology strategies, and some truly eye-opening essays on modern lifestyle design.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at 4 main layers of human functioning. We've got physiology, environment, cognition, and lifestyle design.
We are moving far, far away from just managing the symptoms.
We're talking about redesigning the very framework of your existence, what the lifestyle essays in our stack call your life architecture.
That is the critical paradigm shift we need to establish right up front. This deep dive isn't just about figuring out how to feel a little bit better today so you can successfully drag your exhausted body through tomorrow.
That's the old way of thinking.
It is. This is about fundamentally changing the parameters of your life. We want to explore the science of how to make it biologically impossible for chronic stress to take over your life in the future.
Making it biologically impossible. I love that phrasing.
We are shifting from reactive symptom management, putting out tiny spot fires, to proactive structural design.
But to do that, we have to look at the reality of how we live right now. Let's talk about the myth of just relaxing and the harsh reality of what the sources call structural overload.
Why does traditional relaxation fail us so often?
Well, one of the most compelling essays we reviewed makes a profound point. Traditional relaxation treats stress as a temporary visitor.
It treats stress like a bad cold you just need to get over.
Exactly. But for most of us, stress isn't a visitor. It's a permanent resident living rent-free inside a fundamentally poorly designed lifestyle.
Precisely. And the clinical literature gives us 2 incredibly useful, concrete terms to understand this: structural overload and life friction.
Let's break those down for the listener.
We are culturally conditioned to think of chronic stress as the result of a single catastrophic event. We think of a massive professional failure, a sudden financial loss, a major health crisis.
But the reality observed by researchers is far more mundane.
And honestly, far more insidious because it sneaks up on you.
Yep.
Chronic stress is usually the cumulative product of an overcommitted schedule and entirely non-existent boundaries.
That is structural overload.
It is a building carrying twice the weight it was engineered to hold.
It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's not the tiger chasing you. It's the back-to-back Zoom meetings where you don't even have time to use the restroom.
It's the chaotic hour-long commute in unpredictable traffic.
It's the constantly pinging inbox, the Slack messages at 8 p.m., the social obligations you agreed to 3 weeks ago and now completely dread.
It's all that life friction rubbing against your nervous system day in and day out.
And we have to look at how the body responds to that friction. It's not just a feeling in your mind.
No, it's a cascade of physical reactions. When you are trapped in that constant life friction, your body gets stuck in sympathetic activation.
For the listener, you likely know this as your classic fight-or-flight response.
Right. And evolutionarily speaking, this system is a masterpiece. It was designed to keep you alive when you were out on the savannah and suddenly found yourself being starked by a predator.
Within milliseconds, your heart rate spikes to pump more oxygen.
Your blood vessels constrict to push blood to your major muscle groups.
Your digestion completely shuts down to conserve energy.
And a massive cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline floods your system.
It's meant to be a short, intense, violent burst of energy to help you sprint away and survive. You run, you escape, the threat passes, and your body goes back to normal.
But what happens when the predator is just your daily schedule?
When the threat is an unread email from your boss.
That's the evolutionary mismatch the biological briefings highlight. Your brain cannot distinguish between the existential threat of a physical predator and the social threat of a looming deadline.
To the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center danger is danger.
So when the danger is your everyday life, that fight-or-flight system never receives the signal to turn off. You are perpetually braced for an impact that never actually comes.
The cortisol just pools in your bloodstream.
Exactly.
Which brings me to a point where I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Because a lot of people listening, especially high achievers, might be thinking, okay, but isn't the goal to just get tougher?
That is a very common mindset.
If I do enough deep breathing, if I practice enough mindfulness, shouldn't I be able to build the resilience to just power through a toxic 80-hour work week? Isn't that what mental toughness is?
It's a great question, and it's a trap a lot of ambitious people fall into, but the medical consensus in our sources is a resounding no.
You cannot out-resilience a fundamental biological limit.
The breathing techniques and the mindfulness are incredibly valuable, yes, but they are tools to help you return to baseline after an acute stressor.
They are not magic shields that allow you to endure chronic, systemic abuse of your nervous system without consequence.
If you try to belly breathe your way through a structurally toxic life, you aren't building resilience. You are just masking the symptoms of organ damage while it happens.
It goes back to the burning house metaphor. If your house is engulfed in flames, practicing tactical breathing might lower your heart rate enough to stop you from hyperventilating.
It might give you the clarity to find the exit.
But deep breathing does not put out the fire. The relaxation techniques, when used in isolation, are just reactive band-aids.
If your life architecture remains fixed in a state of excessive, impossible demands, your nervous system simply cannot heal. You are asking your body to do the impossible.
To rest and digest while it genuinely believes it is under attack. So I want you, the listener, to take a second and mentally audit your own life right now. Look at your daily friction. One of the essays in our stack uses a really powerful, sobering phrase.
Pointless suffering.
Are you experiencing pointless suffering simply because your life lacks alignment? Are you burning vast amounts of physical and mental energy just trying to endure your own schedule?
What's fascinating here is the direct, measurable correlation between that environmental friction and your biological baseline state.
The research shows that when you actively reduce that life friction, when you start setting boundaries, when you simplify your commitments, when you eliminate the paper cuts, your baseline stress level naturally drops to match the new environment.
The ultimate goal of life architecture isn't to build a better, more efficient escape hatch. The goal is to design a life you don't need to constantly escape from.
That is the ultimate paradigm shift. Stop relaxing, start redesigning. But of course, practically speaking, before we can start drawing up blueprints to redesign the house, we have to put out the fire that's currently burning inside our bodies.
We have to address the acute symptoms first, so we have the clarity to make structural changes.
That brings us to the physiological foundations. We have to force the nervous system to literally stand down.
We do. Because until you stabilize the physical nervous system, all the brilliant cognitive reframing and lifestyle strategies we are going to discuss later simply won't take root.
Your brain just won't let them.
You have to physically move the body from that sympathetic fight or flight activation we just talked about over to parasympathetic activation.
That is the rest and digest state.
It's the only neurological state where cellular recovery, deep sleep, and actual healing can happen.
And the sources break down the raw, non-negotiable biological requirements for forcing this shift. And they start with movement. Now, listener, before you roll your eyes and think we're going to tell you to train for an Ironman, we aren't.
Not at all. We're looking at the baseline clinical requirements. The data points to 150 minutes of moderate exercise weekly.
If you break that down, it's roughly 20 to 30 minutes a day. Walking, jogging, swimming, cycling, dancing in your kitchen while making dinner, or basic strength training.
But we need to explain why this works biologically, because understanding the mechanism helps with compliance. It's not just about burning calories.
Right. When you are stuck in chronic stress, your bloodstream is full of cortisol and adrenaline, prepping you to run.
Physical activity gives your body the physical release it has been chemically preparing for. When you go for a brisk walk, your skeletal muscles act almost like a sponge.
Metabolizing and burning off those pooled stress hormones.
At the same time, the exertion stimulates the release of endorphins, which are your body's natural endogenous mood elevators and painkillers. It is quite literally a physiological reset button for the endocrine system.
And if 30 minutes sounds like an impossible mountain to climb on a truly terrible day, here is a surprising, incredibly actionable data point from the metabolic studies in our stack.
Even a simple, brisk 10-minute walk can measurably lower your circulating cortisol levels.
Just 10 minutes of putting one foot in front of the other.
The clinical takeaway is that consistency matters far more than intensity. You don't need to destroy yourself at a gym to manage stress. In fact, overtraining can sometimes spike cortisol further.
You just need consistent movement.
But alongside movement, the sources outline immediate tactical interventions. These are the tools you use to force the nervous system to calm down in real time, right at your desk.
The most potent, evidence-backed tool for this is diaphragmatic breathing, often called belly breathing, and they highlight a very specific protocol for this. It's not just taking a deep breath.
It's a structured rhythm. Inhaling deeply through the nose for 4 seconds, and then, this is the crucial part, exhaling slowly through the mouth for 6 seconds. You do this for 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes, the extended exhale is the entire secret to this technique. When you inhale, your heart rate naturally speeds up slightly. When you exhale, it slows down.
By intentionally making your exhale longer than your inhale, you are physically signaling the vagus nerve.
Tell us about the vagus nerve, because the sources talk about this constantly.
The vagus nerve is this incredible cranial nerve that wanders all the way from your brainstem down through your chest to your abdomen. When stimulated by a long exhale, it releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine directly onto your heart.
Acetylcholine acts like nature's brake pedal.
It immediately slows your heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and forces the transition into the parasympathetic state. You are fundamentally hacking your own biology.
It's amazing that we walk around with this built-in tranquilizer system, and most of us never use it.
Another physical intervention mentioned in the clinical briefings is progressive muscle relaxation, or PMR.
I love this one because it addresses the physical armor we put on during the day. When you're stressed, you unconsciously hunch your shoulders, clench your jaw, tighten your core.
PMR is where you intentionally tense specific muscle groups for a few seconds as hard as you can, and then consciously release them.
It's highly effective because chronic stress locks residual tension into your muscle fibers. By intentionally tensing and then completely dropping that tension, you physically destroy the muscular feedback loop.
When your muscles are physically loose, proprioceptors in those muscles send a signal back up to your brain confirming that the physical danger has passed.
The brain thinks, well, if the muscles are this relaxed, there can't possibly be a tiger nearby, and it powers down the alarm system.
Those are your immediate break glass in case of emergency tools, but the experts in our stack are very clear. We also have to talk about the non-negotiable foundations of biological maintenance.
Namely, sleep and nutrition. Without these, your nervous system has absolutely no raw materials to rebuild with. You can't build a strong house out of rotten wood.
Let's talk about sleep first, because I think a lot of people underestimate how destructive poor sleep is to stress management.
The medical consensus is absolute. 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night, period. In a room that is cool, completely dark, and quiet.
But we need to go beyond the basics here. You probably already know that staring at your phone in bed is bad because blue light suppresses melatonin. But the data shows it's not just about sleep onset, how fast you fall asleep, it's about sleep architecture.
Right. The sources emphasize the concept of the digital sunset. The protocol demands absolutely no screens for a full 60 minutes before bed. And the reason is fascinating.
If you are scrolling through social media or reading stressful news until 1 minute to midnight and you manage to fall asleep at midnight, you might think you're fine.
But the artificial light and the cognitive stimulation have severely fragmented your sleep architecture.
Yeah.
Your brain struggles to enter the deep, restorative, slow-wave sleep phases.
Exactly. It's a form of biological self-sabotage. You might be unconscious for 8 hours, but because your sleep cycles are so shallow and fragmented by that late-night hyperarousal, your brain operates the next day as if you only got 4 hours of sleep.
Your amygdala is up to 60% more reactive to negative stimuli when sleep-deprived.
Meaning, the same minor inconvenience that would slightly annoy you on a good day will trigger a full-blown stress response on a bad sleep day.
And the exact same biological reality applies to nutrition. The food you consume dictates your body's physical capacity to cope with the chemical demands of stress.
The anti-stress dietary protocols outlined in our briefings don't focus on restrictive dieting. They focus on adding specific vital nutrients.
You need omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish like salmon or in walnuts, which literally build and protect the cellular structures of your brain.
You need magnesium, found abundantly in dark leafy greens. Magnesium is incredible. It acts as a natural relaxant for the nervous system and helps regulate cortisol.
And you need complex carbohydrates to stabilize your blood sugar. Blood sugar crashes are interpreted by the body as an acute survival threat, which triggers, you guessed it, more cortisol.
But the hydration data might be the most surprising. One of the physiological studies points out that even mild dehydration directly increases cortisol levels.
When your blood volume drops because you lack water, your heart has to work harder to pump blood, which stresses the cardiovascular system. Just forgetting to drink water is a physical stressor.
Which means your brain is interpreting your failure to drink a glass of water as a life-threatening emergency.
On the flip side, the sources are blunt about what we need to limit: caffeine, alcohol, and refined sugars. Now, we aren't saying you can never have a cup of coffee again, but we have to understand the mechanism.
Caffeine and high-sugar doses actively mimic the physiological symptoms of a panic attack.
That's the crucial link. If you are deeply stressed, running on 5 hours of fragmented sleep, mildly dehydrated, and you decide to drink 4 cups of coffee to power through, look at what's happening to your body.
Your heart rate is elevated, your hands might have a slight tremor, your breathing is shallow, your digestion is off.
Your brain monitors these physical signals. It feels the racing heart and the tremors, and it concludes, we are displaying all the physical signs of being under attack. We must be in extreme danger.
It creates a self-fulfilling loop of anxiety. You have to stabilize the physiology first to break that loop.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got the physical fire put out, the heart rate is down, the cortisol is dropping, the vagus nerve is engaged. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we're going to transition our focus from the body to the brain.
This brings us to a massive concept in our sources: cognitive overload and closing the brain's open loops.
This is a crucial pivot in our structural redesign, because as the cognitive psychology briefings point out, much of our modern chronic stress doesn't actually come from physical danger.
Or even from the tasks we are currently doing. It comes from chronic cognitive load. Specifically, it's the crushing mental weight of all your unfinished loops.
Unfinished loops. This is based on a psychological concept known as the Zeigarnik effect, right? The idea that human memory is wired to remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks far better than completed ones.
Exactly. Think about your own brain right now, listener. Think about the mental tabs you have open.
You've got the email to your accountant you still need to reply to, the dentist appointment you keep forgetting to schedule,
The slightly weird comment your boss made in a meeting that you're still analyzing. The fact that your car needs an oil change. The laundry sitting damp in the washing machine.
Every single one of those is an open loop. And your brain is keeping a running, active mental list of all of them simultaneously.
And the biological problem is that keeping that running list active requires massive, continuous amounts of cognitive energy. It operates like RAM in a computer.
If you have 50 heavy applications open in the background, the entire system slows down and the cooling fan kicks into overdrive.
In the human brain, keeping all these loops open keeps the threat detection system on high alert. Evolutionarily, an unresolved issue was a matter of life and death.
So your brain doesn't know the difference between I need to remember to buy almond milk and I need to remember that a tiger lives in those specific bushes.
It just registers that there is an unresolved, potentially dangerous issue requiring constant vigilance.
It's exhausting just thinking about it. So how do we fix it? The tactical solution from the productivity and cognitive experts in our stack is brilliantly simple, yet incredibly hard for people to actually do.
Externalize everything. You have to evict those thoughts from your head and move them into a trusted external system.
You are essentially offloading your biological RAM onto a piece of paper or a hard drive.
When you write something down in a system you trust, you chemically close the mental loop. Your brain looks at the paper and says, okay, the information is safe here. I no longer have to expend energy keeping it active in short-term memory.
That alone immediately lowers your cognitive burden and your baseline anxiety. The sources break this externalization down into 3 distinct tactical steps.
Step 1 is capture. You use a notebook, a digital app, a whiteboard, whatever works for your specific brain, to record absolutely every task, worry, and fleeting idea.
Do a core dump, get it all out of your head, don't organize it yet, just capture it.
Step 2 is time blocking. This is where most people fail.
Instead of looking at a massive, terrifying to-do list of 50 items and frantically juggling tasks based on whoever is yelling the loudest, you assign specific, non-negotiable time slots to them on a calendar.
You decide exactly when the loop will be addressed. Time blocking is powerful because it shifts the cognitive burden from, I have to remember to do this, to, I have an appointment to do this at 2 p.m. on Thursday.
The brain can finally let it go until Thursday.
And step 3 is perhaps the most important rule in our modern, hyper-connected work environment: single tasking.
You must fiercely commit to doing one thing at a time. The neurological sources are absolutely definitive on this. Multitasking is a biological myth.
Yes, the data on this is wild. When you think you are multitasking, say, writing a report while checking emails and listening to audio, you aren't actually doing them simultaneously.
Your brain is just rapidly context switching back and forth.
And that context switching has a massive physiological cost. Every time you switch focus from the report to the email, your brain has to disengage the neural networks for writing and activate the networks for reading communication.
This process burns glucose rapidly and biologically spikes your stress hormones. Studies show it can take over 20 minutes to fully regain your deep focus after just one distraction.
Multitasking shatters your focus, makes you less efficient, and literally manufactures anxiety in your brain.
It's incredible how much of our daily stress is entirely self-inflicted by the mechanics of how we choose to work. But cognitive load isn't just about managing tasks and calendars.
It's also about managing our underlying perception of the stress itself. This brings in a deeply fascinating angle from the philosophical essays in our sources: cognitive reframing and the application of Stoicism.
This is where we bridge biology and philosophy. The literature on cognitive reframing shows that how you perceive stress actually changes the physical damage it causes your body.
This is a monumental finding. If you view stress solely as a toxic external enemy that is unfairly destroying you, your body responds defensively with higher levels of systemic inflammation and a more damaging cortisol profile.
But through intentional cognitive reframing, you can alter that biological dynamic. And the authors lean heavily into the ancient Stoic concept of the dichotomy of control.
For anyone unfamiliar, this is the core principle taught by philosophers like Epictetus. You have to ruthlessly, honestly separate everything in your life into 2 buckets: what is in your power and what is not.
What is actually in your power? Only your own responses, your daily habits, your personal boundaries, your life architecture.
What is not in your power? Almost everything else. External market fluctuations, your boss's bad mood, the traffic on the highway, what other people think of you.
When you stop expending your finite cognitive energy trying to control the uncontrollable, you instantly eliminate a massive source of that pointless suffering we talked about earlier.
You take all that wasted energy and redirect it entirely toward the things you can actually change, your own actions and structure.
And building on this, the sources suggest we completely flip our relationship with stress. Start viewing it as a valuable internal signal rather than a villain.
Think of it like the check engine light on your dashboard. When that light comes on, you don't get mad at the light. You realize it's giving you crucial information.
Stress is just your body's check engine light telling you where your boundaries are failing, where your architecture needs reinforcement, or where you are out of alignment with your values.
To operationalize this, the psychological experts recommend a practice called stress inoculation. Instead of ignoring potential problems and letting them ambush you, you actively visualize upcoming challenges.
You mentally rehearse your calm, structured response to a difficult meeting or a tight deadline before it happens. By doing this, you preemptively lower the amygdala's response, so you aren't caught off guard.
Combine this with a daily gratitude journal, writing down 3 specific things you are grateful for, and you actively shift your brain's reticular activating system to scan the environment for safety and positive alignment.
Rather than constantly scanning for danger, it's about fundamentally retraining your brain's default settings.
But look, I want to be realistic here. Training your brain to focus on safety and singular tasks is incredibly difficult if your immediate environment is actively designed to hijack your attention every 3 seconds.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room. I'm talking directly to you, the listener, and your relationship with that glowing rectangular slot machine currently sitting in your pocket or on your desk.
The smartphone. And more broadly, the entire attention economy. The behavioral science briefings use a very specific, important term here, supernormal stimuli.
The concept originates from evolutionary biology. It describes an artificial stimulus that elicits a stronger reaction than the natural stimulus it mimics.
In our context, highly engineered digital inputs, infinite scrolling news cycles, short-form video algorithms, endless, perfectly curated social media feeds provide a level of extreme, frictionless stimulation that our evolutionary biology simply was not designed to process.
We call it digital dopamine. In nature, you have to work hard for dopamine. You have to forage for food, build a shelter, connect with a human.
Now, every time you swipe, ping, or pull down to refresh, your brain gets an instant, effortless hit of dopamine. It is structurally highly addictive.
And according to the neurobiology experts, it locks your entire central nervous system into a perpetual state of hyperarousal.
And this brings us to a critical biological link that connects back to everything we've discussed so far. When your brain is artificially forced into a state of constant hyperarousal by supernormal stimuli, it is biologically impossible for your nervous system to fully enter that parasympathetic rest and digest state.
You might be sitting on your incredibly comfortable couch, physically motionless, maybe even wearing sweatpants.
But neurologically, your brain is sprinting. It is processing thousands of microdoses of outrage, comparison, and novel information per minute.
You are mentally fighting the tiger while sitting completely still in your living room. The body is confused and exhausted. So, what is the architectural solution?
We have to practice what the sources unapologetically call selective ignorance. We have to actively, aggressively limit our digital consumption to protect our nervous system.
And the tactical strategies they offer for this are brilliant. First up, grayscale mode.
This is a remarkably effective psychological hack that you can do in 10 seconds. By going into your phone's accessibility settings and turning the display entirely to black and white, you immediately neutralize the visual supernormal stimulus.
App designers spend millions of dollars researching the exact shades of red for notification badges and the exact vibrant colors for icons to optimally stimulate your visual cortex and grab your attention.
Removing that color makes the screen significantly less appealing. It breaks the subconscious, almost magnetic urge for mindless scrolling.
I've actually tried that one, and it is genuinely shocking how quickly your $1,000 phone becomes incredibly boring when it looks like a 1950s television.
The second strategy is scheduled use. This requires a mindset shift. We need to stop treating the internet as our default environment. The internet is a tool.
Think about it. You wouldn't walk around all day holding a hammer in your hand just in case you happen to see a nail that needs hitting. You keep the hammer in the toolbox until you need it.
Plan specific, bounded times to check the news or browse social media, use the tool, and then put the tool away.
And the most robust, systemic intervention they suggest is the digital Sabbath. This is dedicating one full day, or if that's impossible, a rigid half day every single week to being entirely, completely offline.
No phone, no laptop, no smart TV, no smartwatch. This extended, unbroken break gives your brain's depleted neurochemistry the actual uninterrupted time it needs to reset dopamine baselines and fundamentally lower your baseline stress.
Okay, I want to stop and ask a practical question here. Because if you tell a modern professional who spends 12 hours a day on screens to suddenly go offline for a whole day, they're going to panic.
It's true.
What do you actually do with yourself when you are offline and the dopamine withdrawals hit?
The environmental health sources are surprisingly unanimous on the most effective destination for that offline time: nature.
Specifically, they point to the extensive research on the practice of forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku, which originated in Japan.
And this isn't just about the vague idea of getting fresh air. The clinical data is deeply compelling.
Yes, the Japanese researchers in the 80s didn't just look at the vibes of the forest, they looked at the chemistry.
Exactly. Trees and plants emit organic compounds called phytoncides. These are essentially the plant's essential oils, used to protect themselves from insects and rot.
When humans breathe in these phytoncides, it triggers a measurable physiological response.
Studies show that spending just 20 minutes immersed in a green space without a screen, just being quietly present, drastically lowers cortisol levels, reduces blood pressure, boosts immune function, and rapidly calms the nervous system.
Furthermore, the visual processing center of the brain is deeply soothed by the fractal patterns found in nature, the way branches splinter or the shape of fern leaves.
It requires almost zero cognitive effort to process, unlike the hard angles and text of a city or a screen.
It's the ultimate biological antidote to the supernormal stimuli. You are replacing the artificial, frantic hyperarousal of the digital world with the natural, grounding, evolutionary pace of the physical world.
And understanding the necessity of that downtime perfectly sets up the next major phase of our structural redesign. We are moving into the concept of reframing recovery and building what the sources call the architecture of peace.
This is where we start bringing all the physiological, cognitive, and environmental changes together into a cohesive lifestyle structure. But before we can build it, we have to confront and dismantle a massive societal obstacle that lives in our own heads.
Hustle culture. Our modern society has this incredibly toxic, pervasive habit of treating rest as a luxury, a reward for burning yourself out, or worse, as a sign of outright laziness.
There's this performative nature to stress now. If you aren't constantly grinding, optimizing every minute, and looking visibly stressed, the implication is that you aren't important or you are falling behind.
The clinical and psychological sources firmly and explicitly correct this dangerous misconception. To quote the underlying premise of the medical briefings, recovery is not laziness, it is biological maintenance.
We have to understand that stress itself, the actual physiological mechanism, isn't the problem. The human body is magnificently designed to handle stress.
Stress only becomes damaging, it only becomes toxic and chronic when the recovery cycles disappear.
Think of it like a Formula One race car. You can drive that car at 200 miles an hour, pushing the engine to its absolute limits, and it will perform beautifully.
But if you refuse to ever pull into the pit stop to change the tires and cool the engine, the car will eventually explode on the track.
The pit stop isn't a sign that the car is weak. The pit stop is the very thing that allows the car to go fast.
And the life architecture we are discussing mandates scheduled, structured recovery across 3 distinct timelines: daily, weekly, and quarterly. Let's break those down.
The daily timeline is your absolute foundation. It dictates the rhythm of your nervous system, and it starts the moment you wake up.
The optimal protocol demands morning sunlight exposure. Getting natural light in your eyes within the first hour of waking up physically halts the production of melatonin.
It triggers a healthy, natural spike of morning cortisol to wake you up, and securely anchors your circadian rhythm, which sets your stress baseline for the entire day.
From there, you incorporate that daily movement, the time-blocked work, and you carve out non-negotiable quiet time for reading, reflection, or family connection in the evening.
Then we zoom out to the weekly timeline. This is where that digital Sabbath or half-day offline comes in. You need a block of time every week that feels fundamentally different from your workdays.
The sources heavily emphasize engaging in tactile hobbies, things you do with your physical hands that yield a tangible result. Gardening, cooking a complex meal, painting, building something, or getting out into nature.
Tactile activities ground you in the physical present and prevent the mind from time traveling to future anxieties.
And finally, the quarterly timeline. The architecture suggests that every 3 months, you plan a 2 to 3 day retreat or a total structural reset.
And to be clear, this does not necessitate an expensive vacation to a luxury resort.
It is simply a dedicated, blocked-out period of time to fully disconnect from your daily demands, step back from the weeds, and evaluate your long-term life trajectory.
You ask yourself the hard questions. Are my daily habits still serving my values? Has the life friction crept back in? Am I carrying weight I need to put down?
It's scheduled preventative maintenance for your life trajectory, and the essays on lifestyle design point out something really profound here.
We've talked a lot about biology and boundaries, but the ultimate, most powerful buffer against burnout, the thing that truly fortifies your architecture is purpose.
The psychological data shows that people experience significantly less physiological stress when they feel their intense efforts actually align with personal meaning.
If you are just grinding 80 hours a week for the sake of grinding, or for a goal you don't even care about, every ounce of that stress feels like that pointless suffering we mentioned earlier. It destroys you faster.
Yes, the presence of meaning alters the biological impact of the stressor. The text outlines 3 core pillars that make up this resilient architecture of peace: mastery, community, and meaningful work.
When your daily actions are moving you toward getting better at a skill you genuinely care about mastery, when you are deeply connected to a supportive group of people community, and when your labor has a purpose beyond just survival meaningful work.
Stress is no longer perceived as an enemy. It is reframed as just the natural, expected resistance you face while building something worthwhile.
And let's not gloss over that community pillar, because the science there is amazing. Social connection is a massive biological buffer against stress.
Face-to-face interaction with supportive people, making eye contact, even pet therapy or volunteering in your community. These things trigger the release of oxytocin.
Oxytocin is a hormone that literally counteracts cortisol and physically repairs heart tissue that has been damaged by stress.
But, and this is the biggest but of the entire deep dive, to build and protect this beautiful architecture of purpose and community, you need to become fluent in the most powerful word in the English language.
The word no. Setting firm, unyielding boundaries is the absolute prerequisite for any of this lifestyle design to work.
You have to learn the uncomfortable skill of saying no to non-essential commitments, unreasonable demands, and things that simply do not align with your architecture.
Because if you don't ruthlessly protect your finite time and energy, the world will gladly spend it for you. You cannot build an architecture of peace if you leave the front door wide open and let everyone else constantly walk in and rearrange the furniture.
You have to be the architect and the bouncer.
But look, let's have a moment of complete realism here.
Yeah.
Let's say you've done the work, you've set the boundaries, you are doing the 4 and 6 out breathing, you're getting morning sunlight, you're walking in the forest, you've grayscaled your phone.
And yet the check engine light is still flashing red. You are still drowning.
At a certain point, lifestyle design isn't enough. Which brings us to our final structural layer: knowing when to call for backup.
It's an incredibly critical distinction to make. Throughout this discussion, we have been very careful not to medicalize everyday structural stress. We don't want to pathologize a normal human reaction to an overloaded schedule.
But the inverse is equally true. We cannot lifestyle design our way out of a genuine clinical crisis.
The medical briefings emphasize that unchecked, long-term chronic stress fundamentally alters your physiology in ways that can lead to severe systemic health issues.
We are talking about cardiovascular disease, systemic inflammation, clinical depression, and a host of unexplained somatic or physical symptoms.
Things like chronic debilitating migraines, severe insomnia that sleep hygiene can't fix, or persistent digestive issues like IBS.
When your stress is actively manifesting as a medical condition, professional help is not a failure. It is a crucial, non-negotiable component of your life architecture.
And the clinical literature outlines several evidence-based therapies that are proven to be highly effective for rewiring a brain that is stuck in chronic overdrive.
The most well-known is CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. This works directly with the cognitive load concepts we discussed earlier.
CBT doesn't just ask you how you feel, it teaches you very specific mechanical coping skills. It helps you identify and actively challenge those catastrophic, anxiety-spiraling thought patterns.
Like assuming one late project means you'll be fired and end up homeless.
Alongside CBT, the sources heavily feature ACT, acceptance, and commitment therapy. ACT operates on a fascinatingly different mechanism.
Imagine you are stuck in quicksand. The intuitive human response, much like our response to anxiety, is to thrash around and aggressively try to fight your way out.
But in quicksand, struggling makes you sink faster. ACT teaches you to stop fighting the quicksand. Instead of trying to aggressively eliminate or suppress stressful thoughts, ACT teaches you psychological flexibility.
How to accept the presence of uncomfortable thoughts without letting them dictate your actions. You learn to observe the anxiety without reacting to it, allowing you to move forward towards your values even while the stress is present.
It's a powerful shift from fighting the mind to observing the mind. There's also MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Developed originally by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, this provides a highly structured, clinical, weeks-long approach to managing chronic pressure.
It takes the mindfulness tools we touched on and applies them in a rigorous therapeutic setting to fundamentally alter how the brain processes pain and stress.
But professional backup isn't exclusively about psychological therapy.
Hmm.
The sources are incredibly pragmatic about the physical body as well. First, if you're experiencing chronic exhaustion or anxiety, get a proper, comprehensive medical evaluation.
You need a physician to run blood panels to rule out underlying physical conditions. Do not automatically assume your fatigue is just your busy schedule.
It could easily be a severe vitamin D or B12 deficiency, an underactive thyroid, or a hormonal imbalance. You have to check the physical hardware.
And second, we have to talk about the environment itself. Don't be afraid to take a hard, objective look at the structure of your workplace.
If your job is the primary immovable source of your structural overload, if the demands are fundamentally, mathematically impossible for one human being to achieve in a 40-hour week, you may need to escalate the issue.
Talk to workplace HR or leadership for structural accommodations, because the hard truth is you cannot deep breathe your way out of a toxic, exploitative work environment.
Sometimes the architecture that desperately needs redesigning isn't your personal life, it's the job itself. And if the job refuses to change, part of your life architecture might eventually involve leaving that job.
That is the ultimate application of the dichotomy of control. You recognize what you cannot fix, and you use your energy to remove yourself from the damage.
Wow. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. We've journeyed all the way from the raw biological reality of the vagus nerve and the fight-or-flight response, through the cognitive load of open loops, past the digital dopamine slot machines, and all the way to redesigning your entire life trajectory with purpose and boundaries.
Let's pull this all together into something concrete for the listener. Based on the synthesis of all our sources, here is your highly actionable daily anti-stress protocol. Let's summarize the blueprint.
In the morning, your priority is setting the biological clock. Get natural sunlight in your eyes immediately after waking up.
Engage in some form of physical movement, even if it is literally just a brisk 10-minute walk around the block to metabolize yesterday's cortisol.
And purposefully plan your day by externalizing your tasks. Get the open loops out of your head and onto a calendar.
Daytime. Execute your time-blocked work. Fiercely practice single-tasking. Close the 40 extra browser tabs. Keep digital distractions to an absolute minimum.
Try putting your phone in grayscale mode to break the dopamine loop. And take short, frequent breaks, not to check the news, but to do 5 minutes of 4 and 6 out breathing to re-engage the parasympathetic nervous system.
Evening. Initiate the digital sunset. Absolutely no screens for a full hour before you intend to sleep.
Engage in light reflection, tactile hobbies, or do a core dump journaling session to capture any remaining mental loops before they ruin your sleep architecture.
And finally, commit to a consistent, protective sleep schedule in a dark, cool room.
It sounds so beautifully simple and logical when you list it out like that, but we know that implementing this in the messy reality of life is profound and challenging.
I want to remind you, the listener, chronic stress is rarely, if ever, solved by relaxation alone.
A lavender bubble bath will never fix a broken, overloaded life. Truly escaping burnout requires a deliberate, courageous, and sometimes uncomfortable redesign of how you choose to live.
Start incredibly small. Pick just 1 or 2 strategies we talked about today. Maybe commit to the digital sunset tonight, or try the 4 and 6 out breathing before your next meeting.
And build your architecture slowly from there. Let go of the perfectionist need to implement all of this perfectly tomorrow. Just begin the process of lowering the friction, one paper cut at a time. Your nervous system will thank you immensely.
It absolutely will.
And I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over today as you go about your week. We spent this entire deep dive talking about defense.
We've talked about how to put out the fire, how to systematically remove the friction, how to externalize your worries.
And how to finally power down your brain's constant, exhausting threat detection system. But here is the real exciting question.
Yeah.
If you successfully do this, if you remove all this friction and quiet the alarms, what will you build in the beautiful, peaceful space that's left behind?
When all your precious daily energy is no longer being consumed, simply trying to survive the sheer weight of your own schedule.
What kind of joy, what kind of mastery, and what kind of connection will you finally have the bandwidth to experience?